I used to work as a night security guard for a small corporate office building in Pennsylvania. The company wasn't big. 2 floors, a front lobby, and a parking lot that barely fit 15 cars. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights were painfully uneventful. The office lights were on motion sensors, so they'd only light up when someone walked through the hallways. It made the place feel alive sometimes. You'd see a light turn on at the far end of the hall even though nobody was there, and your brain would start making up reasons for it. That's how it all started. It was a Wednesday night, late February. The air outside was freezing. That kind of cold where the windows start frosting from the inside. Around 2:45 a.m., I was doing my routine floor check. Everything was normal. Empty cubicles, a faint hum from the server room, and the soft click of my shoes echoing down the hall. As I turned the corner near the copy room, the light at the other end of the hallway flicked on. Motion sensor. I froze. Usually that only happens if someone walks through. Thinking maybe the cleaning crew had come early, I called out, "Hello." No answer. The light stayed on. I walked down the hall slowly, my flashlight cutting through the still air. The closer I got, the more the silence felt thick, like sound itself had been drained out of the building. When I reached the spot where the sensor had triggered, the air felt oddly colder. Nobody was there. I figured maybe a bug or something set it off. But just as I turned to leave, I heard the faintest sound from one of the cubicles nearby. A chair rolling. It was so soft, it almost didn't sound real. I peeked around the corner of the cubicle wall. The chair was slightly turned, facing the walkway, as if someone had just spun it. Still, no one there. At that point, I was more annoyed than scared. I figured maybe I was overthinking. I reset the light manually and went back to the security office. That's when I noticed something strange on the monitors. Camera 3, the hallway I'd just left, showed the motion light turning back on again. I stared at the screen, waiting to see movement. Nothing. Just the light on. Then, about 15 seconds later, a dark shape briefly crossed the frame. Not a clear figure, just movement. Almost like someone walked past the camera but stayed out of focus. I grabbed my flashlight again, against my better judgment, and went back to check. When I got there, the light was still on. But this time, the chair I'd seen earlier was turned all the way toward me. Now I was scared. I backed away slowly, and that's when I heard something behind me. A door shutting from the conference room. I spun around and saw the door swinging slightly as if it had just closed. "Who's in here?" I shouted. "You need to come out now." No response. I pushed the conference room door open. It was pitch black inside except for the faint red glow from the exit sign. The long table in the middle stretched into the darkness. For a second, I thought I saw movement, a shadow shifting behind the chairs. But when I turned the flashlight that way, there was nothing. My radio crackled. It startled me so bad I nearly dropped it. It was the guard from the front lobby, Eerie. He worked the cameras upstairs. He asked, "You're in the East Wing right now?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He paused. Then his voice came back quieter. "Someone just walked behind you, man." My blood ran cold. I turned around instantly, the flashlight beam shaking in my hands. But there was no one behind me. I started backing out of the conference room, keeping my light pointed straight ahead. The second I stepped into the hallway, I heard the conference room door slam shut. I ran back to the security office, locked the door behind me. Ellie was staring at the monitors when I got there. His face was pale. He pointed to the screen. On camera 3. The same hallway. We saw the door I just fled from slowly creak open, and for half a second, something tall, a man, or what looked like one, leaned out of the doorway before stepping back inside. We called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later, searched the whole building, and found no sign of forced entry. Nothing was missing. They said maybe it was a prank, but there were no footprints in the snow outside. No alarms triggered at any door. The company later reviewed the footage from that night, but conveniently, the feed from camera 3 corrupted right around the time we both saw that figure. I quit 2 weeks later. Ellie stayed on for another month before transferring out. He told me something once, months later, after we both left. He said he reviewed the recordings one last time before deleting the corrupted files. And just before the static hit, you could see a faint reflection in the conference room glass. It was a man, standing directly behind me. I worked the night shift as a registered nurse at a small-town hospital in Maine for almost 8 years. Nights were usually quiet, at least compared to the day shift. The building was older, with long, sterile hallways that somehow still smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic. Between midnight and 4 in the morning, the hospital could feel like a completely different world. Empty corridors, dark rooms, and that hollow echo of your own footsteps. That's what made what happened one night in 2016 still hard for me to talk about. I was assigned to the 3rd floor, mostly elderly patients, a few in long-term care. That floor always creeped people out. The fluorescent lights would flicker randomly, and sometimes we'd hear call bells ring from rooms with no patients in them. We joked about it a lot, until the night we stopped joking. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I was doing rounds alone. My coworker, Linda, was down on the 2nd floor handling a new admission. Room 317 was my last stop. An older man named Mr. Weaver. He'd been in a semi-conscious state for days. I walked in quietly, checked his IV, noted his vitals, and as I turned to leave, I heard him whisper something. Barely audible. I leaned closer. He said, "Don't let him in." I froze. I asked, "Who, Mr. Weaver?" He just kept staring past me toward the doorway, eyes wide open but glassy, and then mumbled, "He's standing there." I turned around. The hallway was empty. I told myself he was just confused. Morphine can do that. But as I stepped into the hallway again, I noticed something. One of the other patient room doors, room 321, a room that was supposed to be empty, was slightly open. The light inside was off. The chart on the wall still had the previous patient's name crossed out. Nobody had been assigned there for almost a week. Still, the door being ajar bothered me. I walked over, pushed it open a bit more, and called out softly, "Hello." Silence. The motion light flicked on after a second, and for a split moment, I swear I saw someone standing by the window. A tall figure, shoulders hunched, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. But when the light fully came on, the figure was gone. I felt my throat tighten. I backed out and closed the door, writing it off as my mind playing tricks after too many long shifts. But not even a minute later, I heard footsteps coming from that same room. Slow, deliberate, dragging footsteps. They stopped right behind the door. I turned the corner toward the nurse's station, grabbed the phone, and called security, told them to check the 3rd floor immediately. While waiting, I stayed at the nurse's station, trying to calm myself down. That's when the call bell started ringing. Room 321. The empty room. I just stood there frozen, watching the red light blink above the door. The guard, a guy named Tom, arrived a few minutes later. I told him what happened, and we both went to check the room together. When he opened the door, the room was completely dark. He stepped inside first with his flashlight. I followed. The bed was perfectly made, untouched. But on the floor next to it, we both saw wet footprints, bare footprints, leading from the bed to the doorway. They ended just past the threshold, right where I'd been standing earlier. Tom checked the bathroom, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. We both left the room, shutting the door completely this time. As we were walking back toward the station, we heard a sound from behind us, a metallic crash. Tom spun around, flashlight out. The crash came from inside room 317, Mr. Weaver's room. We ran in. His IV stand was on the floor, his heart monitor flatlining. We tried everything, CPR, adrenaline, but he was gone. As we stood there, catching our breath, I noticed something that still chills me to this day. The window in his room was open, just a few inches, but enough to let the cold air in. And on the inside of the glass, clear as day, were handprints, large, smeared, as if someone had been pressing their palms against the window from the inside. Security pulled the footage later that night. It showed Tom and me walking into room 321. Then, less than a minute after we left, the door slowly opened again on its own. A tall, thin silhouette stepped into the hallway and walked toward room 317. The timestamp matched exactly when Mr. Weaver flatlined. The thing that disturbed me most wasn't what we saw on camera. It was what we didn't. Because when the figure passed the security camera at the nurse's station, there was no reflection in the glass behind it.